Hey everyone, and welcome to HeySummit's live weekly show. I'm Rob from HeySummit, and today I'm pleased to introduce you to Jess Catorc. Jess is the head of
Hello.
partnerships at Teachable and an incredibly talented online branding and website strategist. In fact, she's helped thousands of entrepreneurs to revolutionize their online presence. If you want to catch her best tips, keep a lookout for a new podcast from Jess all about entrepreneurs and money that is coming out soon. I'd love to ask you a couple of questions about that. Her advice has been featured in places like Forbes, Entrepreneur Magazine, The Huffington Post, and way more. So Jess, thank you so much for joining me and welcome.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, super excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks. So you recently spoke at our Rethink 2020 Summit, obviously about Teachable, but you also talked a little bit about growing your online presence through Teachable, and I just find it really interesting that you're not only head of partnerships at Teachable, but you're also a creator yourself. So I'd love to understand, as a creator, how has working for a company that is all about empowering creators, how's that dynamic evolved?
Yeah, no, it's been super interesting. And I think it's like there's so many people at Teachable who either are currently working on a podcast or they have a course or they have their own online business as well. And I think it's incredibly important for any platform to fully understand the journey that goes through creating something. And I think for me, I mean, before I joined Teachable, I had courses that helped entrepreneurs make their own websites. And there's so much that happens in the journey of not just launching and like gaining new customers, but the emotional aspect, the fears that you have, this whole idea of going into something that you've never done before and maybe isn't as common at, with your friends or your family. You have to explain what your idea is. And so I think it's always been from day one, like when Teachable reached out to see if I wanted to join the team, it's always been a very personal connection to it because I understand, like, when we do our own summits and we speak to our creators, like I get the journey, I get the fears, I get the goals with it. And so I think it's just made everything that, I'm doing at Teachable just so much more meaningful because I appreciate the entire process and journey.
Absolutely. And so I'd love to dig into the type of customer and how you all see your customers or your creators at Teachable. And you talked about one element there that I think is also pretty crucial, is the fear of that's going through the mind of these entrepreneurs. So what do you say as the general dynamic or relationship that Teachable has with its customers and creators, and how do you talk to them in a way that gets the idea of what you're trying to achieve with Teachable from a brand and from a company perspective?
I think like one of the best ways to describe, I mean, we've done so many thought exercises around like, what is our brand? Like, who are we? And I think it very much is your partner in business. The dynamic is not one of, like telling people what to do. And it's not one of just being like your cheerleader, but very much being able to support, as you would with a business partner, being able to support and work together towards where you're going. And I think as far as like the creators that are on the platform, I mean, this is probably one of my favorite questions, or when people ask like, what is the most popular industry on Teachable? Because there's so many very niche topics that are thriving. I mean, the example that I will use every single time is Deborah Neiman. She has a course, one of her courses has over 3,000 students, and it's copper deficiency in goats. And I think this is the prime example of not just what we're seeing at Teachable, but what we're seeing in this entire creator economy, passion economy, that the playing field is level. If you are passionate about something, if you see that there is some type of need for you to share your message or to share your knowledge, it's neat because you'll start to build a community around that, even if it seems very niche topic. And that's what we're seeing over and over again as far as the types of people that are using the platform. It's the passion and the knowledge first, and then the topic after that, if that makes sense.
Exactly. I think that's brilliantly said. I'm a huge admirer of Teachable's approach, not only obviously your product, but the tone and the way in which you're wanting to interact with your creators. As you said, it's not about telling them what to do. It's not about trying to tell them that if they don't perform, that's they're no good. It's about providing support and ways that they can use the tools that are available to them to grow their business. And I've always been struck by how conscious and deliberate Teachable is with the way that it describes, the way that it uses language compared with other course platforms or other platforms that allow you to do similar things. And in a landscape where, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a creator, that can be a really stressful time. It can be a really lonely time. There's a lot of loneliness, especially being a solo entrepreneur and a creator. And I do see the space sometimes, especially with some of these products out there, that they might take advantage a little bit of that loneliness, and then have sort of expectations made of their users that join the 6-digit club or whatever, language like this that is not really conducive to helping people. But I've always just been struck by how Teachable's approach is anathema to that, and does that come through with, or does that tone influence the direction of the product that you guys have been working on, especially this new kind of coaching element to it? That was a really big sorry, that was a really long segue, but I'd love to learn a little bit more about the thought process that went into, like, why does Teachable go from courses to coaching?
For sure. Well, one, I appreciate you saying that. And I think there's an entire incredible team behind even like the rebrand. Our head of brand and content, Bethany Cantor, has been such a driving force in that. And when it comes to like the copy, the messaging, the decisions that we're making with the product. And I think this is something that is not just for Teachable, but for any creator that is looking to launch a new product or a new idea. The best thing you can do is not to guess, is not to test, but to listen. And that's been at the core of everything that we've done. And so when it comes to the coaching feature set, it wasn't just why don't we just do coaching? Because that seems to be trendy. We spent so much time speaking to our creators at different stages and different levels of business. And what we found was that on the more experienced side or the more advanced side, the coaching wasn't something that they were just only focusing on. They would have courses, but they would have group coaching programs. They would expand their offers into more higher end one-on-one services. And so that was one data point. And then on the other side, people who are just starting out, the idea of creating a full course and recording content, you need to be very sure that your audience wants that and there's a demand for it. And on the earlier side, people were using coaching and group programs to teach their like courses live, to test out what people would invest in. And so for us, it just, again, going back to the fact that we want to be the business partner with our creators, it's like, well, you obviously, this is something that you do, or it could be valuable for what you're doing. How do we make that easy? How do we implement that directly in the product so you can continue to grow your business? So that was the thought process. But I think for anyone listening, like, you don't need to think of all these great ideas. Just look at what your customers are doing. And if you can't see it, ask them.
Yeah, can't see it, ask them. I think a lot of people make these assumptions. Certainly we're guilty of this too. It's in your mind. You have this idea of what life would be like if everyone just thought your way, but that's not the most effective way to actually making your customers' lives better. And so yeah, it's a really interesting point. Can you talk a little bit more about your customer, about what makes a Teachable customer tick? I know that copper levels in goats on one end, and probably equally distant subjects on the other. Oftentimes, at least for us, we have customers all across the board in terms of what they do, but there are certain things that seem to ring true across large swaths of them. So I'd love to understand a little bit more about what makes a Teachable customer a Teachable customer and not a course creator. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's such a great question. I think we're just seeing like this, not just with the online course platforms, but like every platform, every brand is starting to see that it's like you need to move away from demographics and more so on the psychographics. And I think for Teachable, it's there's two sides I would say is like the largest ones. One is this desire to like contribute something to their audience, to, I know this sounds cliche, but to the world of,
Mhm.
there is this passion that you have, this knowledge that you've gained. And I think when you go through the process of sharing your knowledge and creating a course, you gain clarity on why it is that you're teaching, and you remember your own story and your own journey. You remember the times where you had an idea and you fell, or there was no resources and you felt alone. And I think there is very much that personal connection to sharing something that you're so passionate about. And it's not just through courses. I mean, you see that through coaching, you see that through webinars and YouTube videos and summits. It's that desire to the journey, I think, of being a creator doesn't begin at the point of learning the skill or mastery, but it's when you start to share what you've mastered with other people. And I think that really is at the core of all of our customers, from copper deficiency in goats, to painters, to coders, to even business mentors. That's the biggest one. And then also, I think because most people in Teachable, most creators do want to help and they do want to do something good, there is that element of burnout. There is that element of, I can't keep reinventing the wheel when it comes to my content and always thinking of new ideas. I can't always show up one-on-one, and I feel bad for charging more for my services, but I also need to because I have no more time. And courses and coaching and recorded content is really coming to play in that, where it allows them to say yes to the things that matter to them, say yes to things that they want to, but still be able to grow a sustainable business and to reach more people that way.
And it sounds like that might have been a concern for, how can we make sure that people feel comfortable offering their time at a higher rate one-on-one from a coaching feature perspective. What went into that education process, whether or not education was needed with your creators, when you were thinking about how to introduce this in the most impactful way?
I mean, it's still a conversation. And I think to the end of time, it will be a conversation around just pricing in general. Yeah. Some people have no problem charging a ton of money and not feeling confident in the product they're providing. But for most people, it is always top of mind. And I think the conversation has to come. I mean, there's a couple of different factors, but I think one is it took me so long to understand why this is the case, but when you have a premium priced product, and it doesn't mean that it is not even accessible to anyone in your audience, but you are charging what you're worth, you're charging for what your time is worth, your knowledge is worth, people get better results. Mm-hmm. And it's, when you have something that is a lower priced or maybe free, and you've probably found this too if you've tested out different lead magnets, that people perceive something as less valuable if the price point doesn't match it. Mm. And so I think it's important that, if you want people to get results, it is still important to ensure that you are charging a fair price for that. But I think it's just talking about it more. We hardly talk about, just in general, as in this industry, as creators, we hardly talk about pricing. We don't really know what our competitors are charging unless it's on their sales page. We feel uncomfortable asking for more money. And I think that is the baseline of the conversation that needs to begin for people to feel more comfortable with it.
And do you feel like the concern, or is there a challenge with your creators that hopefully they're now kind of discovering and growing, but making that jump from, I can create something on my own and put it out there, versus I'm charging someone for having a call with me and I'm valued in that way? I just would imagine there's imposter syndrome that might go into that. There's as you were saying, how do I even price this? But because you're saying, you want to be the business partner of your creators. If you can get past that, and if you can start processing that, that you grow not only as a person in business, but as a person in terms of understanding your own worth. So have you seen that journey firsthand with some of your creators?
For sure. When you're charging what you're worth, you all of a sudden have so much more energy. You have so many more ideas because you are not burnt out. Was it 2018? Was that when we saw the rise of so many YouTube creators just burn out,
Yeah.
taking a break? But I do think to add on to this idea of charging what you're worth, um, one of the best models that I've seen is from Legion. She's the founder of Atelier Ventures. She used to be at A16Z, and she dubbed the term the passion economy. And she had this very interesting perspective on Kevin Kelly's 1,000 True Fans, where she took it a step further, where she said you actually only need 100 true fans and segmenting your audience based off of their engagement. So basically, and I highly recommend you guys check out this article, but really the thought process behind that is there's a huge jump from offering free content to a $500 course, not just in the mentality and the mindset of the creator, but the audience and what they're used to and what they expect. And so you see like there's this subtle transition of people offering free content to doing something like a Patreon, where you're getting like the people who are your loyal fans who most of the time aren't paying for the content, they're paying to support you as the individual. But then using as the next stepping point, having your products, having the things that offer value that regardless of if people care about the success of your business or not, they are investing in your product because they're getting something from it. And I think implementing these stepping stones, whether that is, going that route or doing something like a tripwire or a lower price product to something more expensive to a more premium one-on-one service, you mitigate or you minimize that jump from free content to pay me $2,000, which I think for anyone on both sides is a big jump.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. So how has COVID affected the kind of creator economy for you all? I imagine that you could think of it in two ways. One, it has an adverse effect because everybody's quite worried, and you hear some people say that entrepreneurs do better in a good economy, and on the other hand, you might think that it's actually booming because people are thinking that they need to diversify their income. Maybe they're not so sure about their job, and maybe they want to be in more control of how they make their money. Or maybe they're just going through a big rethink of their own, personal lives. Have you guys seen a market difference? And what kind of impact has that had on your creators?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen, I think, with so many other online platforms or tools that allow people to share their business, their knowledge online, we have seen an incredible growth. But I think what's important to kind of look into that is it's not like, oh, like all these new people are signing up for Teachable. It's very much a reflection on, it's not just people who are like, I need to start my business now, I need to make money now, but it's now this idea of, oh, there's other things that I can do to diversify my income. So I'm not reliant on just my dance studio or just my 9 to 5 and my traditional income or my traditional employment. It's starting to get people to think of, what does this actually look like? And I'm really, really excited for just the next year even to see what comes out from this time, because I think even when we get back to normal, people are doing their in-person conferences and they're doing their, offline like business, whatever that is, like your store, or your coaching, or your teaching, people will start to see that, hang on, I can still keep this online thing happening. I can still diversify my income. I can still create YouTube videos and have a product. I can still have a dance studio, but still reach like thousands of people or hundreds or tens of people around the world. And so we're definitely seeing a spike in people creating courses, but even selling courses as well, and selling digital content. But I think the more exciting part is like, what is this actually going to lead to? And it's allowing more people to step into that.
Cool. Very cool. Well, so I did want to ask, I know we don't have too much more time, but I'd love to ask a little bit about your podcast, your upcoming money podcast, especially with how it works or how it's going to work. So what's it going to involve?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, this is an idea that I've had, and I've talked about it for a long, long time, is this whole, there's a pressure in the creator space with not just talking about money, but I feel like we see the highlight reels and we see the loudest players. So the people whose businesses and brands are dependent on them sharing their numbers and sharing how much money they're making. But I know when I stepped into the space, I was 23 and I launched a business. I had all of these really big goals. And in my mind, I thought business is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's going to take time. And so my goals were reflective of that. And I started to see that I was hitting a lot of those milestones pretty quickly. And I was thrilled. I was so excited. I thought I was doing incredible. And then I stepped into this online space and groups, and it seemed like everyone was making six figures in their first year. And I was like, oh, I was almost embarrassed. I was like, oh, I really should not share my successes. Like, obviously, I am like nothing. But then as I've started to grow into this industry and this space, and even seen the behind the scenes of everything when it comes to just entrepreneurs and launches, there's so much more behind the story. You know, people don't share how much they're spending on Facebook ads. They're not sharing their debt. They're not sharing the financial support they're receiving from their family or friends. And there's nothing wrong with any of those cases. But I think when we don't have the conversation, we create this immense pressure to like keep up with the Joneses. And
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. What's your excuse? Well,
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, awesome. I'm looking forward to that. So it'll be like money diaries, you were saying?
Exactly. So it's going to be not tips. People are just going to share like a look at what do their finances look like and some of the lessons they've learned.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jess, for talking with me today, and for making the time. If anyone's out there who'd like to connect with Jess, you can find her on Instagram at Jess Catorc, and then there's a C at the end there. You can always find Teachable on @Teachable on all the major socials. And to you, the listener or the viewer, thank you so much for tuning in this week's show, whether it's live or on the podcast. And wherever you are in the world, we hope that you're staying safe, and see you next week. Thanks, Jess.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.